Hello. They say the worst betrayals come from the people closest to you. I used to think that was just some cliché you read in cheap novels. But then, one random Tuesday morning, I learned firsthand just how true it was. It started with something small, insignificant, really. A phone left on the counter. Hers. Face up. A notification popping onto the screen as I sipped my morning coffee. Last night was amazing. I can still feel you. I took another sip. Let the words settle in. Looked at the name on the screen. Not mine. Now, most guys in this situation would go through the whole emotional circus. Rage, heartbreak, tears, screaming. I did none of that. See, I'm not like most men. I don't react. I calculate. I put my cup down, picked up her phone, and scrolled. No passcode. She trusted me. The irony. The messages? A full-blown confession of adultery, gift-wrapped and time-stamped. Compliments. Inside jokes. Plans. Hotel names. Receipts. Even a little heart emoji at the end, just in case I wasn't getting the full picture. Most men would have felt their world collapse. Mine didn't. If anything, my world became clearer. Sharper. I wasn't devastated. I was focused. I placed her phone back exactly as I found it, making sure to leave no trace that I knew. Because if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this. The element of surprise is everything. That evening, she walked through the door like nothing happened. Kissed my cheek. Smiled. Asked how my day was. The performance of a lifetime. I almost applauded. I played along. I asked about her day. Listened as she lied to my face with the kind of confidence only a seasoned liar could muster. She stretched, sighed, said she was exhausted. Yeah, I bet. I nodded. Smiled. Took another sip of my drink. She had no idea that the ground beneath her was already crumbling. See, most people, when they discover a betrayal, they want immediate justice. A confrontation. A fight. Some desperate attempt to get an apology that won't mean anything. But I believe in patience. In precision. In making sure the fall is long enough for them to feel every second of the drop. And I already knew exactly where to strike first. She had spent her entire life seeking the approval of one man, her father. A retired military officer. A man who lived by one code. Loyalty is everything. A man who respected me more than he respected his own daughter. And now? Now, I was going to show him exactly what kind of daughter he had raised. But not yet. Not tonight. No, tonight, she could keep pretending. Smiling. Laughing. Acting like she wasn't sleeping next to the very man planning her downfall. Because the best part of revenge isn't the execution. It's the anticipation. I used to think I had it all. Not in a flashy, movie-perfect kind of way, but in the quiet, comfortable way that makes a man feel like he's exactly where he's supposed to be. My life was steady, predictable in the best way. I woke up every morning to the smell of coffee brewing, a habit my wife had picked up early in our marriage. You work too hard, she'd always say, sliding a fresh cup toward me as I sat at the kitchen island. At least let me make sure you start your day right. I'd smirk, shake my head, and take a sip, thinking, this is the kind of woman a man thanks the universe for. Our home was nothing extravagant, but it was ours. A 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people nodded to each other in passing but didn't pry into your business. A neatly trimmed lawn, a garage just big enough to fit my car, and the small collection of tools I swore I'd find time to use someday. The kind of place that felt like stability. Like a promise kept. Evenings were familiar, comforting. She'd get home from work before me, usually already in the kitchen, humming some tune under her breath as she cooked. I used to joke that she had a song for every mood, upbeat for good days, slow and soft for the bad ones. I never asked how she was feeling. I just listened. That was enough. We had our rituals. Friday night movies, her curled up against me on the couch, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, my arm draped over her as she absent-mindedly traced circles on my wrist. Sunday morning drives, windows down, coffee in hand, no real destination, just the open road and the sound of her laughter over whatever old song was playing on the radio. Inside jokes, the kind only couples who had truly built a life together could have. Like how she'd always steal the last bite of my food no matter how much she insisted she wasn't hungry. Or how she'd call me an old man for grumbling about gas prices, even though she'd do the exact same thing a week later. I was happy. Or at least, I thought I was. Looking back, the cracks had been there all along, subtle as hairline fractures in glass. The way her phone never left her side, even when she was just going to the bathroom. How she used to tease me for my habit of checking the locks before bed, but suddenly started doing it herself, except it wasn't the locks, it was her notifications. Or the night she'd turn away just a little too quickly when I tried to pull her close, mumbling something about being tired. At the time, I brushed it off. People go through phases, right? Work stress, changing routines, it's all part of marriage. You don't question one missed kiss when you've had thousands before it. You don't dwell on one distracted, love you, when you've built an entire life together. But in hindsight, those weren't phases. They were signs. Signs that she had already started slipping away. There were other things, too. The way she started dressing a little different, not for me, not for date nights, but for work. Suddenly, her wardrobe was full of outfits that made her look just a little too good for an office job she used to complain about. New perfume. New lingerie that I never got to see. She was changing, and I was too busy trusting her to notice. I remember one night in particular. It was a Saturday, and we had no plans. I was sitting on the couch, half watching a game while she scrolled through her phone beside me. At some point, she got a text, and I caught the shift in her expression, the slightest, almost imperceptible flicker of something. Guilt? Excitement? I wasn't sure. But it was different. "What's up?" I had asked, casual, not thinking much of it. She glanced at me, too quick, too rehearsed. "Just Sophie," she said, locking her phone and stretching as if to physically shake off the moment. She's being dramatic again. Sophie. Her best friend. The perfect alibi. At the time, I didn't think twice. Why would I? I wasn't the kind of man who checked his wife's phone. I wasn't insecure. I believed in trust, in giving each other space. I believed in her. That night, she went to bed early. I stayed up, finishing the game, half distracted by thoughts of how lucky I was to have a wife who still cared enough to spend lazy weekends with me. I remember looking at our wedding photo on the mantle, the way she was laughing in it, head tilted back, eyes crinkled with genuine joy. That was the woman I married. That was the woman I thought I still had. I didn't know then that the woman lying in our bed upstairs was already gone. If I had paid attention, really paid attention, I might have noticed it sooner. The way her touches had become less about love and more about routine. The way she started offering justifications for things I never asked about. The way she held me a little too tight after nights she was out with friends, as if she was trying to convince herself that she still loved me. But I didn't see it. Not yet. Because when you love someone, you don't look for an expiration date. You don't scan for faults. You don't hold your breath waiting for the moment they betray you. You just live. And that's what I did. I lived in our home, in our routines, in our quiet happiness. Blissfully unaware that the woman I loved had already set fire to it all. They say hindsight is 20/20ths, but in the moment, warning signs don't look like flashing neon lights. They're subtle. Small shifts in behavior, little inconsistencies that don't quite add up but aren't enough to raise the alarm, until they are. For me, the first real sign came on an otherwise forgettable Thursday night. Nothing special, no big event. Just a normal evening, or at least, it should have been. She was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone, absently stirring a pot of pasta while I leaned against the counter, watching the news on the TV in the living room. Then it happened. Her phone buzzed, once, then again, rapid and insistent. I wasn't even looking at her, but I felt the shift. A hesitation. A half-second pause before she reached for it, turning slightly away from me as she read the message. Her grip on the spoon tightened, her shoulders stiffened, just a fraction. Then, just as quickly, she forced herself back into ease, typing a response with deliberate casualness before setting the phone face down on the counter. That was new. I didn't say anything at first. Just let it sit there, the way you let a glass sit on the edge of a table, waiting to see if it will tip over on its own. Who was that? I asked finally, keeping my voice light, just a husband making conversation. She didn't look up. Sophie, she said automatically. Just being dramatic about work stuff again. Sophie. The same name as always. Too easy. Too rehearsed. That's so? I said, taking a slow sip of my drink. Weird. You looked tense for a second there. That made her glance up, just briefly, her expression neutral. Did I? A small laugh. Forced. Nah, just annoyed. She overthinks everything. I nodded, said nothing more, let her believe I had accepted the explanation. But something had changed. See, most men make the mistake of confronting too soon. Pushing before they have all the pieces. I wasn't going to do that. Not yet. I don't ask questions I don't already know the answers to. So I let it go for the moment. But I started watching. And I started seeing. Little things. Things that would have seemed harmless in isolation but, together, painted a picture I wasn't sure I wanted to see. She started going to bed early. Too early. Some nights, I'd come upstairs expecting to find her reading or watching something, only to see her phone light turn off just as I walked in. She'd roll over, murmuring about how tired she was, and I'd slide into bed beside her, staring at the ceiling, wondering why it suddenly felt like we were sleeping in different worlds. She started checking her phone differently. Before, she'd scroll mindlessly in front of me, showing me memes, asking me about work. Now she held it at an angle, just slightly, as if shielding the screen from casual glances. Nothing obvious, nothing blatant, just enough. And then there were the showers. She never used to shower right after coming home. That was new. At first, I chalked it up to the gym. She had started working out more, a new routine, she had called it. But I noticed the way she'd walk in, straight to the bathroom without stopping to kiss me hello, without the usual rundown of her day. And when I'd casually go upstairs after her, the door was always locked. She never locked the door before. I tested it one night. Knocked lightly. "Hey, everything okay?" A pause. Then her voice, too quick, too light. "Yeah, just needed to unwind. Be out in a sec." I stood there for a moment, listening to the water run. Something in my gut twisted, and I had the distinct, uncomfortable realization that I didn't know if I wanted her to open the door or not. Because if she did, I might have to face the answer I wasn't ready for. But the thing is, once you notice one crack, you start seeing them everywhere. Her perfume was stronger on some nights, lingering in the air like a ghost of something I wasn't invited to. Her excuses became thinner, her explanations just a little too vague. And then there was the silence. Before, we talked. About everything. Even on the dullest of nights, we'd sit together, share thoughts, laugh over nothing. But lately, she was distracted. Distant. Like her mind was somewhere else. With someone else. I tested her one night. Sat beside her on the couch, draped an arm over her shoulder the way I always did. She stiffened, not a lot, just enough for me to feel it. Like the touch of my skin against hers was something she had to endure, not something she wanted. That was when I knew. Not the full picture. Not yet. But the shape of it. The edges forming into something dark, something undeniable. She was slipping away. And I was going to find out exactly who she was slipping toward. They say once you start looking for something you find it everywhere, and that was exactly what happened the moment I decided I wasn't just going to sit back and wonder. I was going to know, because doubt is a slow poison, but the truth, even when it's ugly, is at least something you can use, something you can act on, something you can control. So I started watching, really watching, not just glancing, not just assuming, but truly paying attention to every detail, every movement, every shift in her behavior. That might have seemed normal before, but now stood out like flashing warning signs in a pitch-black night. It started with the phone, that little device that suddenly never left her side, not even for a second. Before, she used to leave it on the coffee table face up, casual as anything, notifications coming in without a care, but now it was always face down, always in her pocket, always somewhere out of sight. And that wasn't all. She changed her password too. I noticed it one evening when she was texting, and I caught a glimpse of her screen, the familiar lock screen, the one I used to know by heart, now replaced with a new code, one I wasn't supposed to see, one I wasn't meant to know. Because before, she never cared if I grabbed her phone to look something up, never cared if I used it to check the time or to skip a song on Spotify. But now the idea of me even touching it made her tense up just a little, just enough. Then there were the lies, small at first, harmless if I wasn't looking closely, but I was. One night she told me she was going to dinner with Sophie again, always Sophie, but something felt off, so I waited, bided my time, and then an hour later I called Sophie, casual, friendly. And sure enough, Sophie was home, said she hadn't seen my wife in weeks, said she thought we were doing great, said she hoped we'd get together soon. I smiled, nodded, even though she couldn't see me, thanked her for the chat, and hung up. And that was when I knew I wasn't just imagining things. She wasn't just distant, she wasn't just stressed, she was lying to my face and expecting me to swallow it without question. So I started keeping track of everything, her location, her schedule, her habits. Before, she always let me know where she was, not because I asked, but because that's what people in real relationships do. Now suddenly plans were vague, timelines blurred. She'd say she was working late, but there was no extra paycheck, no complaints about overtime, no signs that work was even that busy. She'd say she was going to the gym, but come home without that post-workout glow, without the soreness she used to talk about, without even taking a real shower, just a rinse, quick, efficient, like she was washing off something else. And then there were the reactions, simple, harmless questions that suddenly made her defensive. I asked what she had for lunch once, something I had asked 100 times before, but this time she blinked, hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering, then Over-explained, too much detail, too specific, too rehearsed, so I just nodded, smiled, let her think I believed her, but I made a note in my mind because hesitation is the biggest tell of all. People don't pause to remember the truth, they pause when they're trying to craft a lie, and her pauses were getting longer, her lies more frequent, her excuses more flimsy. But I didn't confront her, not yet, because confrontation is for men who don't have a plan, and I needed a plan. I needed proof, something undeniable, something that when the moment came I could lay out in front of her like a deck of cards and watch as her world collapsed around her, because I wasn't going to be the fool who got lied to. I was going to be the man who made sure she regretted ever thinking I wouldn't see through her act. So I waited, I watched, I listened, I started memorizing patterns: where she said she was, where she actually was, how long she took to answer texts, how she held herself after coming home, if she smelled different, if her hair was damp, if her lipstick was freshly applied when it shouldn't be. I tracked every inconsistency, every subtle change, every single thing that could lead me closer to the truth, and the deeper I looked, the more I found. Then one night I decided to test her. She had told me she was going out with a coworker just to drink, nothing big. I nodded, smiled, said have fun, but the moment she walked out the door I was already moving, already checking her car's GPS history, something she never thought to erase, and there it was, a location that wasn't the bar she mentioned, but a quiet little hotel on the other side of town. That was the moment I stopped doubting, that was the moment I stopped wondering, that was the moment I knew. And once you know, there's no going back. I always thought there was a moment, a clear, defining second, when the truth hits you like a freight train, but the reality is different. The truth doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in, slow and suffocating, like a room filling with smoke. It started the moment I saw the hotel location on her GPS history, but the real impact didn't come until I saw the proof with my own eyes, the kind of evidence that doesn't leave room for doubt or denial. Cold, hard, undeniable. The kind that makes you realize your entire life has been a well-rehearsed lie. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid there beside her, listening to her breathing, steady, peaceful, as if she wasn't the reason my mind was burning. I wondered if she had texted him before bed, if she had told him she missed him, if she had whispered the same "I love you" she used to say to me. My fingers itched to grab her phone, to rip away the last layer of deception, but I didn't. Not yet. I needed more. I needed everything. The next day, I worked from home, something I rarely did. She left like usual, a quick kiss on my cheek, that same smile, that same routine. "Have a good day," she said, as if she wasn't walking straight into the arms of another man. I watched from the window as she drove away, my stomach a quiet storm. And then I followed. She wasn't going to work. I knew that already. She wasn't going to see Sophie either. No, she was going somewhere else, somewhere he was waiting. I kept my distance, careful, controlled, my hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me steady. I expected a bar, a hotel, maybe even his house. What I didn't expect was our restaurant. Our restaurant. The one where we had anniversaries, where I proposed, where we celebrated promotions and birthdays and the little moments in between. The place that meant something. And she was sitting there in our booth, leaning across the table, laughing, eyes locked onto someone who wasn't me. I sat there in my car, watching as she reached out, touched his hand, that same soft, affectionate gesture I used to think was mine alone. I couldn't see his face, but I could see the way she looked at him, the way her body leaned in, drawn to him like a magnet. I had been searching for proof, for something undeniable, and here it was, right in front of me, playing out like a scene from a movie I never wanted to be in. I could have stormed in right then. Could have flipped the table, caused a scene, shattered the illusion right in front of her eyes. But that's what she would have expected. That's what any man would do. But I wasn't just any man. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of an outburst. I wasn't going to give her an easy way out. Instead, I took my phone, snapped a few photos, documented the moment she destroyed everything, and then I left. Because I didn't need to hear her excuses, her fake apologies, her desperate attempts to rewrite the story into something that made her the victim. I already knew how this was going to end. I drove home, my mind razor-sharp, emotions controlled, calculated. Anger was there, yes, a deep, burning fury, but not the kind that makes you reckless. The kind that sharpens you, makes you dangerous. She thought she was in control, thought she had me fooled, but she had no idea that I was already 10 steps ahead. By the time she came home that evening, I was already waiting. Not at the door, not in the kitchen, but in my usual spot, as if nothing had changed. Because to her, nothing had. She walked in, kissed my cheek, smelled like wine and his cologne, and she had no idea that I had seen her, that I had proof, that she was already caught. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, peeling off her coat. acting like she hadn't spent the afternoon betraying everything we built. I smiled. "Same as always," I said. And that was the biggest lie I had ever told. I sat there calm, controlled the way a man does when he already knows how the story ends. She moved around the house like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't spent the afternoon in the arms of another man, like she wasn't breathing borrowed air in a house built on a lie she had no idea that every smile, every casual touch, every meaningless word she threw my way was just another brick in the wall I was building between us, because I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to break, I wasn't going to give her a single second of satisfaction. No, I was going to take my time, and when the moment came, I would make sure she felt every single ounce of the betrayal she had handed me. I wasn't just going to leave her, I was going to make sure she lost everything she actually cared about. And that's when it hit me. She didn't care about me anymore. That much was obvious, but there was one thing she had spent her entire life trying to protect, one thing she valued more than anything: her reputation, her image, the way people saw her. She had built herself into this perfect woman, the devoted wife, the charming friend, the career-driven professional, the doting daughter, especially the doting daughter. Her father was her moral compass, the man she still sought approval from, the only person who had ever truly had power over her, and that was the weakness I would exploit, because he was the kind of man who believed in loyalty and discipline, the kind of man who had welcomed me into his family like a son, and if there was one person on this earth she couldn't bear to disappoint, it was him. So I started planning carefully, methodically, step by step, because the best revenge isn't loud, it isn't messy, it's quiet, precise, like a scalpel slicing through everything they hold dear and leaving them bleeding before they even realize they've been cut. I needed evidence, not just for myself, but for him. I already had the photos from the restaurant, but I needed more. I needed undeniable proof, something that couldn't be twisted into a misunderstanding, something that would break through whatever pathetic excuses she would try to make. So I did what any rational man would do. I got access to her phone. Not through force, not through anger, but through patience. She still trusted me, still saw me as the same oblivious husband she had been playing for months, which meant she wasn't careful, not really. She still left her phone on the counter when she showered, still connected it to the car Bluetooth when she drove, still had a routine that was easy to predict, and that's all I needed. One small window, one moment when she wasn't paying attention, and just like that I was in her messages, in her emails, in every single disgusting detail she had tried to keep hidden from me. And what I found was worse than I expected. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. The messages weren't just about hotel rooms and secret meetups, they were about me, the things she told him, the things she laughed about behind my back, the way she mocked the life we had built together like it was a joke, something disposable, something meaningless. I read through every word, letting them carve into me like a blade, because pain is a tool if you know how to use it. And by the time I put the phone back exactly where I found it, I wasn't just ready for revenge, I was hungry for it. The plan was simple and brutal. I wasn't going to expose her in a fit of rage. I wasn't going to throw the proof in her face and demand an explanation. No, I was going to let her destroy herself. I was going to give her the rope and watch as she tightened it around her own neck. And the perfect opportunity was right in front of me. Her father's retirement celebration, a formal affair, a night where she would be surrounded by family, friends, colleagues, the people whose respect she had spent her entire life cultivating, the people who believed in the perfect image she had so carefully crafted, and I was going to shatter it in front of every single one of them. I prepared everything in silence, transferred the messages, the photos, the timestamps into a single file, something undeniable, something no excuse could erase, and then I waited. I sat across from her at the dinner table, listened to her talk about the event, about how proud she was of her father, how much it meant to her that everything be perfect, and I smiled, nodded, played the part of the devoted husband one last time, because the next time she walked into a room filled with those people, it would be the last time she walked in with her head held high, because once I was done, there wouldn't be a single person left who looked at her the same way again. The night of the event arrived, and I was the perfect husband, calm, composed, smiling in all the right places, shaking hands with family, congratulating her father on his retirement, playing the role I had mastered for years, while my wife basked in the glow of admiration, completely unaware that every step she took was another step closer to the edge of a cliff she couldn't see. She looked stunned. Of course, she always did, especially when she was pretending, when she was curating the image of the perfect wife, the devoted daughter, the successful woman who had everything under control. She had spent weeks planning this night, making sure everything was flawless down to the smallest detail, because this wasn't just about her father, this was about her, about being seen as the golden child, the one who always did things right, the one who made her parents proud. She had built her entire life around that illusion, and she was so sure that nothing could ever shatter it. Until I did. The venue was grand, elegant chandeliers reflected in the polished marble floor, laughter and conversation filled the air, waiters moved between guests offering glasses of champagne. It was exactly the kind of setting she thrived in, and I let her enjoy it for a Little while let her feel untouchable just a little longer because I wanted her to have that last moment of security before I ripped it away. I had planned every detail perfectly. I had thought about every reaction, every possible excuse, every pathetic attempt she might make to twist the narrative, and I made sure there was no way out, no way to spin this into a misunderstanding, no way to manipulate the truth into something softer, something forgivable. No, this was going to hit like a hammer, and she would have to sit there and take it because there would be nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The moment arrived when her father stood to give his speech, a heartfelt thank you to everyone in the room for celebrating his legacy, his career, his values, and as I stood there listening, I almost felt sorry for him because he had raised a man of honor, a man of discipline and integrity, and yet his own daughter was the complete opposite, and that was about to become painfully clear. When the applause died down, I took a step forward, calm, steady, and said, "If I could just take a moment, I'd like to say something to honor this family." Polite, respectful, exactly what everyone expected from me, and I saw her face out of the corner of my eye, still relaxed, still smiling, because she thought I was about to deliver some sentimental speech about family, about marriage, about love. She had no idea that the next words out of my mouth would destroy her. "I want to talk about loyalty." I began, my voice carrying across the room. As the conversations quieted, people turned their attention to me, smiling, nodding, waiting for some heartfelt words. But she wasn't smiling anymore. Something in my tone had changed, and she felt it. I saw the first flicker of unease in her eyes, the way her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass. "Loyalty is something I've always valued, something this family has always valued," I continued. "It's the foundation of trust, the thing that holds relationships together, and when it's broken, well..." I let the words hang in the air, let the silence stretch, let the tension coil tighter and tighter until everyone was hanging on my next words, including her. And then I pulled out my phone, opened the file I had prepared, and with the press of a button, the screen behind me lit up. Her messages, her pictures, the receipts, the hotel bookings, the timestamps, all of it displayed in high definition for everyone in that room to see. Gasps filled the air, murmurs of shock, disbelief, confusion, but the only sound I was focused on was the sharp inhale of breath from her father as he stared at the screen, his face frozen, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might break. The betrayal in his eyes was absolute, complete, and when I finally turned to look at my wife, she was pale, frozen, completely trapped. She opened her mouth, maybe to deny it, maybe to spin some desperate lie, but I cut her off before she could even start, because this wasn't a conversation, this wasn't something she could talk her way out of, this was judgment. And I had already passed the sentence. "I trusted you," I said simply, not loud, not angry, just cold, just final. And then I turned to her father, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "I thought you should know what kind of daughter you raised." And then I walked away, leaving her to deal with the wreckage, knowing that no matter what excuse she tried to come up with, no one would believe her, not after seeing the truth laid bare, not after watching the perfect image she had spent her life crafting crumble into dust right before their eyes. The moment stretched out like an eternity, the weight of silence pressing down on the room as the evidence burned into the minds of every single person present. Her messages, her betrayals, her secret life exposed in brutal clarity. The air was thick with disbelief. Whispers rippling through the crowd like an unstoppable wave, but the only thing I focused on was her, the way her face had gone pale, her lips parted in shock, eyes darting frantically across the room, as if searching for some escape, some way out of this nightmare she had created. Her hands trembled as she reached for her father, as if she could somehow salvage this, if she could just explain it away, Dad. But she didn't get the chance. The look on his face stopped her mid-sentence, a look of complete disgust, not anger, not fury, just the cold realization that the daughter he had spent his entire life believing in, the one he had held to the highest standard, was nothing more than a liar, a fraud. Her mouth snapped shut, her breathing shallow, her entire body frozen in place, because there was nothing she could say that would make this go away. I watched as it hit her, the reality, the consequences, the fact that there was no coming back from this. Her eyes flicked to me, desperate, pleading, but I had nothing for her, no sympathy, no mercy, because I had already given her my trust, my love, my loyalty, and she had thrown it away like it meant nothing. So now she would know what it felt like to be powerless, to have everything she cared about ripped away in a single moment, just like she had done to me. "I can explain," she whispered, voice shaky, weak, the kind of weakness that comes from knowing you have lost everything before the fight has even begun. I tilted my head slightly, as if considering her words, as if there was even the slightest possibility that anything she said would matter, but I already knew the truth, and so did everyone else in this room. "Explain?" I echoed slowly, my voice calm, controlled, measured. "Explain what exactly? That you spent months sneaking around behind my back, that you lied to me, to your family, to everyone who ever believed you were a good person." I let the words settle, let her feel them sink in, because this wasn't about anger, this was about control, She had controlled the narrative for so long, played the part of the perfect wife, while laughing at me behind closed doors. Now she would see what it felt like to be stripped of that power. She shook her head frantically, reaching out as if touching me would somehow fix everything, but I took a step back, watching as the rejection hit her like a physical blow. It wasn't like that, I swear. I was going to tell you, I just... Her voice cracked, panic creeping in, because she knew there was no salvaging this, no turning back, no way to manipulate her way out. Her father spoke, then, voice low, sharp, like steel cutting through the tension. You lied to me. Just 4 words, but they shattered whatever defense she had left. She turned to him, eyes wide with desperation. Dad, please, I never meant for... But he shook his head, his expression void of emotion, disappointment, the kind of disappointment that breaks a person far worse than anger ever could. I didn't raise you to be this, he said simply, and just like that she crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks, her breath coming in uneven gasps, because the one person she had never wanted to disappoint, the one man whose approval she had chased her entire life, had just cast her aside, and there was no fixing that, no erasing it, no running from the fact that in this moment she had lost him forever. And I let her sit in that, let her feel it, let her drown in the same kind of helplessness she had made me feel when she decided my love, my trust, our life together was something she could gamble away without consequence. People were staring, whispering, some turning away, unable to watch the spectacle unfold, but I wanted her to see it, to understand that she had done this to herself, that she had walked into this trap thinking she was untouchable, only to find herself completely exposed and completely alone. She turned back to me, her hands shaking, mascara streaking down her face. Please, she whispered, broken, shattered, but I only looked at her the way she had looked at me all those nights. She came home after being with him and smiled like nothing was wrong, like I was nothing more than an afterthought. No, I said simply, final, and then I walked away, leaving her standing there in the wreckage of her own making, knowing that no matter what happened next, no matter how many times she tried to explain or beg or deny, the damage was done, and she would never escape it, because the truth was out, and there was nothing left for her to hide behind. The aftermath was exactly what I had envisioned. Every single piece of her life, carefully built around her image, her reputation, her status, came crashing down in the most brutal and public way possible. Because once the truth is out, once the illusion is shattered, there's no putting it back together, no salvaging what's already turned to dust. She tried, of course, in the days that followed. She tried everything. At first it was denial. She told people it was a misunderstanding, that I had twisted things, that I was bitter and trying to ruin her out of spite. But the problem was the evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, irrefutable. No one believed her, because no one could. The moment her father looked at her with disappointment instead of defense, she knew it was over, because his word carried more weight than hers ever could, and he had washed his hands of her right then and there. Then came the begging, long texts, voicemails, sobbing messages at 2 in the morning, her voice raw, desperate, pleading for another chance, insisting she had made a mistake, that she still loved me, that she just needed to explain. But I never responded, never acknowledged a single word, because she had made her choice long before that night, and now she was going to live with it. The fallout was immediate. Her family wanted nothing to do with her. She tried to turn to her mother, who only shook her head with the same quiet disappointment. Her father had given her no anger, no shouting, just that deep, cutting shame that eats a person from the inside out. She lost the support of her friends too, because even the ones who might have wanted to defend her couldn't stand against the weight of the proof. No one wanted to be associated with a liar. No one wanted to be the person still standing in her corner when the world had already decided she wasn't worth the effort. Her career suffered too. She had always been well respected in her field, built her image as a hard-working professional, someone who was reliable, trustworthy, dedicated. But now people whispered behind her back. Her boss looked at her differently. Colleagues who once admired her suddenly kept their distance, because even if the affair had nothing to do with work, character, our matters and her character had been torn apart for everyone to see. And him? The other man? He was gone immediately. The moment everything came out, he cut ties, blocked her, disappeared without a second thought, because that's how it always goes. These affairs are built on lies and fantasies, but the moment reality crashes down, they run. He wasn't going to be there to pick up the pieces. He wasn't going to hold her hand while she watched her life crumble around her. He had gotten what he wanted, and now that she was nothing but a wreckage, he wanted no part of it. But the real pain, the real punishment wasn't in losing her career, her social standing, or even her family. It was losing me, because that's when it finally sank in, when she finally understood that she hadn't just lost her image or her comfort, she had lost the One person who had truly loved her because for all her begging, for all her desperate attempts to reach me, I never once answered. I never gave her the closure she so desperately wanted because she didn't deserve it. She wanted to be heard to explain herself, to find a way to justify what she did, but I had already made my decision, and that decision was silence. I moved on and made sure she knew it. I didn't just leave. I thrived while she struggled, while she tried to salvage the ruins of her life. I made sure she saw me happy, moving forward, surrounded by friends, respected, admired. I made sure she saw me with someone better, a woman who was everything she wasn't: loyal, honest, real, and nothing hurt her more than that, because while she sat alone drowning in the consequences of her own choices, I was out there living the life she had thrown away. She tried to come back one last time, a pathetic final attempt. A handwritten letter slipped into my mailbox, pages of apologies, explanations, excuses, but I didn't even read it. I simply tossed it into the trash without a second thought, because that's exactly what she had become, just another bad decision that belonged in the past. And as I walked away, without a single ounce of regret, I knew I had won completely, entirely, without mercy. Some people say revenge isn't worth it, that it doesn't change what happened, that it doesn't heal the betrayal, but those people have never had their trust shattered by the one person they thought would never betray them. Those people have never stood in the wreckage of a life they built only to realize it had been crumbling for far longer than they knew. Those people have never watched someone who thought they were untouchable fall so far, so fast, that they never even had time to scream, "I didn't just get revenge, I got justice." I didn't raise my voice, I didn't throw punches, I didn't lose control. I simply let the truth do what it does best: destroy those who can't handle it. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. She thought she could rewrite the story, that she could twist her way out of the consequences, that she could manipulate her way back into my life, but she was wrong, because I wasn't just another fool caught in a web of lies. I was the one holding the scissors, and when the time came, I cut her out completely. While she lost everything, I thrived. While she searched for sympathy and found none, I moved forward without a single glance back, because that's what she deserved. She didn't deserve a dramatic confrontation. She didn't deserve my anger, my heartbreak, my pain. She deserved to watch me live the life she threw away, knowing she would never be part of it again. And the best part, the part that made it all worth it, was knowing that she would spend the rest of her life wondering what could have been. She would look back on every single decision she made, every lie, every excuse, every betrayal, and realize that she had done this to herself. She had no one else to blame, no one else to turn to, no one else to fix what was beyond repair. And I didn't need to lift a finger. I didn't need to chase her down demanding explanations. I didn't need to beg for answers. I simply let her feel the weight of losing everything without a single word from me, and that silence was more devastating than anything I could have said. In the end, that's what people don't understand about revenge. It's not about rage, it's not about destruction, it's about control. It's about reclaiming the power that was stolen from you. It's about making sure the person who betrayed you feels every ounce of what they put you through. And that's exactly what happened. She lost her family, her reputation, her career, the respect of everyone who once believed in her. But more than anything, she lost me, and deep down I know that's what will haunt her the most, because she didn't just cheat on me, she didn't just betray a marriage, she threw away the one person who would have given her everything, and now there's no going back. So now I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have confronted her, screamed, demanded answers, fought for a love that was already dead? Or would you have done what I did and let the truth destroy her without ever lifting a hand? Because at the end of the day, she will spend the rest of her life regretting her choices, and I will never spend a single second regretting mine. Bye-bye.